Et même avec l'équipe de l'autre côté, vive élection ça. Soit regarder sur YouTube pour nous capables permettre de vivre bien élection ça cap fait côté que nous gagnons bien la radio-télévision Céleste qui a en direct pour permettre que vous vive situation yo côté que nous-mêmes techniquement nous capables de dire nous presque prêts pour élection ça yo qui au même pas le fait de l'espérer. Alors qui en situation est et dans Pennsylvania côté que bien nous-mêmes nous situons nous président Donald Trump derrière même il a 50 voix à côté ça veut dire que il y a une différence d'élection qui fait déjà les gains dans la coupe Pennsylvania mais la cour et nous dans la cour Georgia côté que nous pral faire vivre situation avec Barack Obama.
Versions of ourselves. That's who he is. And that's who we all need to be. And yet I know that there's still people out there who aren't voting. We got 1 day left. So I want to talk to you right now. People in Georgia right now who've decided not to vote. Obvious. Maybe you don't like who's in that there's still people out there who you just lost faith in government. You're frustrated. You don't. So I want to talk to you right now. Maybe people in Georgia right now who you're decided not to vote. What the two current senators in Georgia have done. Maybe you don't like who's in not really the White House right now, but or certain about you just lost how much of a faith in government. You're frustrated. You don't think government makes a difference. Maybe. And I understand you're troubled by what the two current senators in Georgia have done. Government doesn't solve every problem. Really confident or certain about we've got a long legacy in this country it'll make in your life. Of hardship and prejudice. And I understand that. And government's not perfect. People government doesn't solve every problem. Taking advantage of folks who aren't. We've got a long legacy in this country and of hardship. We have a history of and prejudice. And we have a history right here in Georgia. Powerful and rich, taking advantage of folks who aren't, and others fought. And sometimes I can get down. We have a history of Michelle can get down. Sometimes we're at a dinner table, we're just like, Lord, we have a history right here in Georgia. Why are we still fighting some of these battles? And others fought. I thought we settled some of these arguments. And sometimes I can get down. I thought we had turned the corner. Michelle can get down. Sometimes we're at a dinner table, we're just like, why are we still hearing people praise? Why are we still fighting some of these battles? Folks who think that I thought we settled some of these arguments. Determines your status. I thought we had turned the corner. Why are we still hearing people praise as if women shouldn't be treated the same as men? The color of your skin determines your status. And paid the same for doing the same work. Why are we having these old arguments? I thought these were done. It can be discouraging sometimes. Women shouldn't be treated the same as men. And you drive through some neighborhoods in Atlanta or Chicago or Washington for doing the same work. Why are we having these old arguments? I thought these were done. It can be discouraging sometimes. And you drive through some neighborhoods in Atlanta or Chicago or Washington, D.C., or you go out in some rural areas in some small towns and you think, you know what? Folks are still having a hard time and some of the things that should have been fixed haven't been fixed and you get discouraged. I get it. Even as President of the United States, there were times where I thought, man, I thought I could get this done or that done and somehow the special interests and the lobbyists and others are blocking it and making it hard, and you get frustrated. I get it. But you know what? Whenever I get in one of those moods, I just remind myself that when we work together, when we put in a little bit of effort, things may not get perfect, but they do get better. When John Lewis started marching across that bridge, it didn't eliminate racism and bigotry in America, but it started something that got the Voting Rights Act passed. And it made things better. I didn't get everything done that I wanted to get done when I was president, but I could say when I look back at the end of 8 years, you know what? The country is better off now than it was when I took office. 20-some million people have health care that didn't have it before. That's a good thing. Children that were in poverty have been lifted up out of poverty. Not all of them, but some of them. That's a good thing. Maybe this next generation came up and saw that, you know, black and white can work together, that we don't have to be at odds, that we can treat each other with dignity and respect, that we don't have to be scared of each other, but should reach out to each other. A president by himself can't solve every challenge in the economy. But if we elect people like Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, if we elect Reverend Warnock and Jon Ossoff, who are focused on working people and getting you the help that you need, it can make a difference for thousands of people and 10,000s of people, 100, maybe a few million people might be better in our criminal justice system. But if we elect district attorneys and state's attorneys and sheriffs who are focused on equality and justice, it can make things better. John understood this. Dr. King understood this. Abraham Lincoln understood it. We knew, John, I remember talking to John Lewis right before he passed. And we talked about all these young people who would come out to start this wave of marches, nonviolent, peaceful protests all across the country. And we talked about how this younger generation, they don't have to choose between protest and politics. If we're going to translate our aspirations into laws and practices, we've got to engage in both. There's nothing un-American about protest. This country was founded on protesting against injustice. That's what the American Revolution was about. Now, John ran for office all those years and kept protesting even while he was in office, because he understood they're two sides of the same coin. It's us acting on behalf of our highest aspirations, even though we know we won't get there. We're never going to get all the way to the promised land, but we can help lay the path for future generations to get there. That's what public service should be about. That's what citizenship should be about. That's what voting is about. Not making things perfect, but making things better. Laying that path, brick by brick, to a better future. Putting us on track so that a generation from now, 2 generations from now, 3 generations from now, we can look back and we can say, you know, that was a moment when we turned towards our better angels, toward our better impulses, where we started to pull together as a nation instead of being riven apart. And the fact that we don't get 100% of what we want is not a good reason not to vote. We got to keep at it. You know, typically just over 50% of us vote. Think about that. Almost half the people who are eligible typically do not vote. And yes, part of this is because folks make it hard to vote. Your governor right here in Georgia seems to job to come up with ways to make it as hard as possible for some Georgians to vote. These folks sure are scared of folks voting, aren't they? Think about that. If you've decided you don't want to vote, don't you wonder why it is that the folks in power are so worried about you voting? There must be a reason why they try to make it hard for you to vote. It's because they know if you vote, things change. The answer is not to stay home, it's to turn out like never before and show them what's in your heart. Show them the spirit of community. Imagine if 60% of us voted. Of us voted, not 100%, just 70%. Imagine January 20th when we swear in President Biden and Vice President Harris, and Reverend Warnock and Jon Ossoff are in the United States Senate. Imagine having leaders in office who have a plan to get us out of this mess and who care about working Americans and have a plan to help you start getting ahead, who believe in science and have a plan to protect this planet for our kids, who believe in closer to an America where no matter what you look like or where you come from or who you love or how much money you got, everybody's treated with dignity. Everybody's treated with respect. Everybody, if they're willing to work hard, has a chance to make it. Imagine having public officials who abide by the values our mamas and our grandmas and our grandpas taught us. Being honest, being responsible, working hard, looking after those who can't look after themselves, showing compassion, believing in justice. All that is possible. All that is within our reach. And the reason I know it is because I've seen it all across the country. Every time I've gotten discouraged over these last 4 years, whenever I've seen our worst impulses revealed, I've also seen America at its best. I've seen folks of every age and background look out for other people, packing cities and town squares so that families wouldn't be separated, rallying so that another classroom won't get shot up, proclaiming that we need to do something to make sure our kids won't grow up in an uninhabitable planet. We have seen healthcare workers risk their lives daily to save somebody else's loved ones. We've seen people contribute and volunteer, bring food to neighbors, help out the elderly who are alone, who are having an especially hard time right now. We've seen Americans together to declare in the face of injustice and brutality that Black lives matter. No more, but no less. That we don't want anybody feeling superior or better than anybody else. We just want everybody to treat each other with common decency and respect. That's all we want, just basic fairness, so that no child in this country should feel the continuing sting of racism and that they're judged by the content of their character. We've seen people march all across this country. You've seen towns where there are barely any black folks, and they still got folks marching with signs up because they believe that we can be better. Georgia, America's a good and decent place. We've just seen so much noise and so much nonsense and distraction. And we've seen media companies and politicians make a business of making us hate each other because it drives clicks and drives eyeballs. And so sometimes it's hard to remember. But I'm asking you to remember what this country can be. Georgia's a better place than it used to be. There used to be a lot of violence and cruelty in this place. And it's a better place because some folks went out there and made sacrifices, black and white. And America, it's a better place than it used to be. But it can be better now. But you've got to do the work. It's all up to you now. I'm asking you in your ability to believe in Jon Ossoff, and Reverend Warnock and Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, but most importantly, your collective ability to get us out right now. We can't abandon the young people who aren't getting the education they deserve right now. We can't abandon those young people who are out there who inspired us this summer. We got to channel their activism into action. We can't just imagine a better future. We got to fight for it. If you haven't voted yet, go out and vote. It's not that much to ask. Go out there and vote. Do this basic thing that can make America better. Tomorrow, we can choose to protect health care for our families. Tomorrow, we can rebuild an economy that rewards working Americans and not just the wealthy of us. Tomorrow, we can elect leaders who reflect our best instincts and not our worst. Tomorrow, we can choose hope over fear and unity over division. The promise of change over the power of the status quo. And if we do, Georgia, if we vote like our lives depend on it, because we will elect John Ossoff and Reverend Warnock to the United States Senate. We will send Joe Biden and Kamala Harris to the White House. And we will leave no doubt about who we are and what this country stands for. Honk if you're ready to go. Honk if you're fired up. Georgia, let's do this. Let's go out there and show that we believe. God bless you. God bless the United States of America.
Qui t'a intervenu dans le cadre de campagne, dernier jour campagne pour élection 2020. N'a pas dit qu'il y a 95 millions de monde qui déjà voté déjà, il y a 95 millions de monde qui déjà voté dans ça nous relais early vote. Eh bien demain si Dieu veut, c'est pour la journée décisive là, côté que eh bien soit président Trump lui-même il prend Kembe Mayet là ou du moins Joe Biden il prend place là dans même président Trump, mais pour l'instant gagnant Jean Oudjoula gagne en pile monde déjà qui déjà voté pour capable permettre
The journey has taken us here through a campaign of unexpected twists and turns, from a global pandemic to civil unrest, to an incumbent president diagnosed with the coronavirus. With the election of our lifetimes upon us, each day brings more surprises, and whatever happens, we'll be with you every step of the way, wherever this journey takes us next.
Déjà, eh bien, il gagnait des states qui ont même gagné des moyens pour capable de
She's Joe Biden's choice to be next in line. But who is Kamala Harris? Join me, Joy Reid, as I explore her life's journey from Oakland to Washington on my 6-part podcast, Kamala, Next in Line. New episodes every Monday. Subscribe for free wherever you get your podcasts.
Wherever you are going to vote, there might be a line this year. Bring something to sit on. Bring snacks.
Élection en 2020, côté que ancien président Barack Obama fait tout veli dans Georgia là, a mené une campagne serré là pour Joe Biden. Il était vraiment adressé lui avec foule ça qui était là tap tani et n'a pas connaître tout gagner une possibilité pour nous capable avec ou demain si tu veux, il y a une possibilité bien que Jean Oudjoula l'on regarder image normale, son normal, sauf que il y a une petite synchronisation, problème de synchronisation, eh bien, qui permettent que ou capable gain une petite difficulté tout petit, mais pour autant n'a toujours capable rester pour nous permettre d'informer. Encore une fois, au branché Radio Télévision Céleste, je regarde nous en mode de grande chaîne télévision. Si vous même pour voir ça n'a pas là, on est d'aller sur YouTube pour là, ou après sur grande chaîne télévision qui travaille là pour vous-même.
watch what they do.
Nous avons promis demain si Dieu veut, même reporter nous avons dans la rue pour capable permettre
Protests broke out. Coronavirus pandemic destroyed. Emergency approval to treat COVID-19 with plasma. Many questions remain about how well it works.
From every angle.
How much of the increased tension was due to the militias that came here?
On the ground.
Deadly western wildfires in California.
Entire communities were also wiped off the map.
And in depth.
One of the big concerns is indoor air quality. What are you doing to address that?
NBC Nightly News with Lester Holt.
Mais de toute façon, demain si Dieu veut, situation on va capable suivre
In the final hours of the 2020 campaign, President Trump isn't wasting a minute, stopping in North Carolina, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan. Here's part of his closing argument in Fayetteville, North Carolina,
Tomorrow you have the power to do so much for our country. You have the power to vote. So go out and vote. Unless you're going to vote for somebody other than me, in which case, sit it out. You ever hear these politicians get up and they say, you have the power to vote, and it makes no difference if you vote for me or my opponent. They're such liars, right? They're such liars. So get your friends, get your family, get your neighbors, get your co-workers, get your boss, grab him by the tie, say, let's go, boss. And get out and vote.
NBC News correspondent Carol Lee joins me from Scranton, Pennsylvania. Carol, Trump is trailing Joe Biden by 5 points in the battleground states. That's according to the latest NBC News Wall Street Journal polling. What message is the president driving home today? We heard part of it there.
Yeah, that's his main message. It's basically vote. But what he's adding to that is this sense of unfairness, trying to make the case to his supporters that they are trying to steal the election from them, they being the media, Democrats, the Supreme Court. We've heard the president today really to go after the Supreme Court and their decision to allow mail-in ballots to be counted several days after Election Day, specifically in the state of Pennsylvania here. The president saying that that has put the country in danger, and that is something that is going to allow for corruption. Now, obviously, there's no evidence of any corruption. It is quite usual and typical for ballots to be counted after Election Day. They are received by Election Day. It's also worth noting. But the president using that to really gin up his supporters and say that if you don't get out there and vote today, tomorrow, doesn't matter. But if you don't do it, then this election is going to be taken from you. That's essentially his argument that we're hearing from him so far today.
Carol, Pennsylvania could decide this whole thing. It flipped for the president in 2016. Trump is stopping in Scranton. That's Joe Biden's hometown, of course. Where does the race stand there?
Yeah, well, according to our own new NBC polling, the former vice president is ahead of President Trump, but it's within the margin of error. So it's a very tight race here. And remember, the president only won this state by several tens of thousands of votes. It's not like it was a huge margin. So it's very tight. And we've seen President Trump, this is his 10th visit here. So that's in the last 3 weeks. And 5 of those stops have been made just in the last 3 days. So that gives you a sense of how important they see Pennsylvania. I'm sorry, it's very windy here. And they're saying that if it's a must win, it's not necessarily the case for Joe Biden. He has different paths. And the president today, I mean, he started his remarks here saying to the people of Scranton that Pennsylvania, if they win Pennsylvania, they've won the whole thing and the race is over. So from his perspective, as the campaign's perspective, it's a really critical state for him, but it's very close.
Carol, the pandemic has upended just about everything about this election. Last night, the president suggested that he might fire Dr. Fauci. Listen to this.
Don't tell anybody, but let me wait till a little bit after the election. I appreciate the advice. I appreciate that. No, he's been wrong on a lot. He's a nice man, though. He's been wrong on a lot.
Carol, Carol, 50% of registered voters have a positive opinion of Dr. Fauci compared to just 13% who are negative. That's according to our new NBC News Wall Street Journal poll. Does the Trump campaign think that threatening to fire Fauci is a good strategy right now, especially given the record number of new cases we've been seeing?
Well, look, if you look deeper into that polling, it also shows that President Trump supporters have a more negative view of Dr. Fauci. And as you heard there was that chant of fire Fauci. So from the president's perspective, you know, if this is an effort to try to. So it's a bit of a risk, but it's not surprising, Allison. This is something, and particularly just the fact that Dr. Fauci gets better polling marks than president has been an irritant for the president for some time. They have publicly disagreed. It's gotten increasingly contentious, risk, but it's not surprising, Allison. This is something, and particularly just the fact that Dr. Fauci gets better polling marks than president has been an irritant for the president for some time. They have publicly disagreed. It's gotten increasingly contentious.
Voilà, amis auditeurs, nous avons fait un jumelage avec de grands médias qui peuvent permettre la population connaître comment la situation a évolué dans le cadre d'élection. J'en ai déjà d'où déjà, nous répétons encore. Eh bien, si vous avez dit élection finie dans Pennsylvania, eh bien, président Joe Biden a battu président Trump. Résultat aura sorti. Alors, Jean nous tendez là, président Donald Trump lui-même, il gagne dans l'esprit, pour lui capable bien faire s'il t'a gagné l'élection ça. Côté qu'il t'a permettre la population supporter qui ou même te chauffer à blanc, elle dit eh bien pinga nous dit personne l'autre monde ça. Eh bien, aussitôt que je gagner l'élection, même quand monsieur prend des décisions qui pas bon, eh bien, pas 10 personnes moun ça, aussitôt que je gagne l'élection, moi après révoquer monsieur c'est moun yo même yo t'a créé eh bien fire. Nous étions en direct, nous aller dans nous pral tendre comment eh bien quelques moun yo
Trump administration the COVID-19 the way he handled it from the beginning.
But just to be clear, and this is true, I think, in every election, when you're talking about the last 24 hours before people go to the polls, this is not about flipping people. This is about getting people who will vote for your guy to go to the polls. And that's exactly what they're doing. As Twist said, in Pennsylvania alone, they've knocked on 50,000 doors, sent out more than 3 million text messages. That's what these closing hours are all about. Now, on the Republican side, we did make multiple requests to go out with them. We never heard back from them that we could go with them door to door, but they have had a robust operation. They do have larger new registration numbers than the Democrats, but the Democrats right now feel pretty confident that they're within about a 3-point range for Joe Biden to win this race. Allison?
Chris, I know you also spoke with Bob Casey today, the senior U.S. Senator from Pennsylvania. He's also a Scranton native. He's a friend of Joe Biden's. What did he tell you about the state of the race in Pennsylvania?
Yeah, let me set the stage because he's somebody who's run, I think, 6 statewide races. His dad was governor here, so not a lot of people know more about the ground game, especially in these closing days, than he does. And he particularly knows this area coming from Scranton, where we are in Lackawanna County, where frankly, Donald Trump shocked people by keeping it close 4 years ago and winning in Luzerne County next door, absolutely annihilating Hillary Clinton by 20 points in the Union area. He says on election night he's going to be watching here to see what the margins are. He says, look, Joe Biden doesn't have to win. He has to close those margins. And here's a little bit more about what he told me about what he's going to be looking for on election night. Take a listen.
I think the big difference between 2016 and now is people know both these candidates well. They know the president's performance in office, and he's failed on the virus. The virus is raging all throughout this state and throughout the country. And people want to know that the next president is going to be able to tackle the virus and create millions of good-paying jobs. The president has no plans on either, but in this region, I think it's especially apparent that even though the president did way above or outperformed expectations in this region last time, I think it'll be less this time.
Yeah, so, you know, we have a whole series of polls that have come out in this state over just the last 24 hours or so that show Joe Biden up by about 5 to 9 points again. The senator, one of the people who says it's going to be tighter. Historically, it's been tighter, maybe 3 points, but he's feeling very positive. And again, you can't overstate the national average, so that Democrats believe is playing into it too, Allison.
Yeah, you can't separate those two issues at all anymore. Chris Jansing on the ground in Scranton, thank you so much.
Thanks.
Nearly 3 million people voted early in Michigan, but we don't know when we'll get final results for the state. Election officials are not allowed to count absentee ballots until Election Day, but a new bill in Michigan allows jurisdictions with more than 25,000 residents to begin 3 million people voted early in Michigan. News now correspondent will get final results for the state. Election officials are not allowed to count absentee ballots until Election Day, but a new bill in Michigan allows jurisdictions with more than 25,000 residents to begin processing the votes. NBC News Now correspondent Dasha Burns joins us from Grand Rapids, Michigan, at the convention center where all of the absentee ballots in Grand Rapids will be pre-processed. Dasha, it's so good to see you. Show us around. Tell us what processing, not counting, is all about.
Hey, Allison, check this out. 52,000 ballots in this massive room here today, though these election workers are really making their way through. These tables were all stacked to the brim earlier today, but they are making their way through these ballots. They're putting the finished ones under the table over here. So they are not counting them today. But here's what election workers are allowed to do. They can begin opening these envelopes. And we've got some diligent workers here at the electronic letter opener. We've got Margie, Nick, Nicholas, Tennille and Harrison over here. We got two twins, by the way, college graduates working hard here today. Now, once they get those envelopes open, they are going right over here to these hardworking folks, about 50 election workers here who are going to be taking the secrecy envelope out of the absentee ballot envelope and checking that the number on that ballot stub matches the number on the envelope. And then they are going away. They're going to get sealed up until 7 a.m. tomorrow morning. And here with me, I've got Grand Rapids City Clerk Joel Hondorp. Joel, how big of a deal is this Head Start for you guys?
It's huge. We've been asking for this as clerks for years. We asked the legislature, in order to get our work done, you can do one of two things. You can give us more time or give us more money. And so for this gives us more time. So we've never had this where we could have this opportunity to open these envelopes ahead of time so we can be prepared to get ballots to the tabulator sooner.
And what do you think? Are you going to get through all 52,000 tonight?
It depends, because we got to make sure that we haven't too far ahead if we because the ballots take up more space in a bag compared to laying flat. So it's kind of hard to measure what that will be. So all these little things, yes, correct. So we purchased more bags so we were prepared for this election with this much. So we're going through it, and these folks have been doing a great job today and going through it and being thorough and efficient.
They are hustling. The big question, though, on everyone's mind: when do you think you will be able to deliver results out of the city of Grand Rapids?
I can't give a good hardcore answer on that because we haven't started tabulating. We don't know what the equipment's doing. So I never speak for a computer and a computer tabulator. So they all worked during our testing. Everything worked out just fine, but that's during testing in a very not with coffee stains or anything else on them. So we'll go through the process. So
if things go smoothly, what's your ETA?
I don't have an ETA. So hopefully sometime during the day on Wednesday is probably where we'll be. But once again, I can't control what's going to happen with tabulars or various other things.
There are a lot of X factors at play. Thank you so much, Joel. Allison, Michigan election officials are saying don't count on election night. Hopefully, in an ideal world, if things go smoothly, as Joel said, all the tabulators work sometime on Wednesday, but we'll just have to see what happens, Allison.
Dasha, so impressive seeing everything that's going on there. And I've said this before, I will say it again. I am always so impressed. Everywhere you go, you know everybody's name. You blow me away, my friend.
these folks work hard. We want to give them a shout out.
Amazing. Dasha, we miss you. Great to see you.
Great to see you.
I'm going to drive down to the American Airlines Center, and I'm going to cast my early vote. Don't wait till November 3rd. Know where and when you can early vote. It's the right thing to do.
Hey guys, I'm Janelle Monáe, and guess what? I voted already. It's so important this year for everyone to make their voice heard, no matter what might get in the way. I recommend doing it early so you don't have to keep thinking about it. Vote.
The journey has taken us here through a campaign of unexpected twists and turns. From a global pandemic to civil unrest to an incumbent president diagnosed with the coronavirus. With the election of our lifetimes upon us, each day brings more surprises. And whatever happens, we'll be with the way, wherever this journey takes us next.
You ready to go to work?
It's every Monday. Subscribe for free wherever you get your podcasts.
Wherever you are going to vote, there might be a lot.
Oui, amis auditeurs, branchés Radio-Télévision Céleste, j'en ai déjà à travail pour même là. Pour nous, dans quelle mesure est-ce que nous sommes capables de faire une représentation dans le cadre de l'élection 2020 qui a fait dans le pays États-Unis, côté que gagne un président sortant, ça veut dire président qui sous pouvoir, qui prend lui-même dans la course là pour le prendre un deuxième mandat, face avec président qui aspirant, à savoir M. Joe Biden. Nous voulons parler de Donald Trump face à Joe Biden, c'est eux-mêmes qui prennent le toqué cogno. Après quelques mois de campagne, serré, eh bien, élection a commencé depuis plusieurs semaines, mais c'est demain, si Dieu veut, qui prend la journée décisive dans le cadre d'élection ça, côté que, eh bien, nous allons connaître qui est-ce qui va arriver président. Nous allons gagner une idée dans les premières heures, mais nous avons élection, résultat élection de l'Institut VA capable de prendre du temps compte tenu des situations qui présentaient à Nissa dans le cadre de l'élection pendant que il y a un coronavirus là qui permet de prendre des décisions qui sont capables de retarder les résultats définitifs élection 2020. Alors, pour bien dire, nous-mêmes, côté dans Philadelphie, nous avons fait tout moyen possible pour nous capables de mener pour nous-mêmes toute action qui a passé et nous team là avec nous avons gagné plusieurs médias côté qui n'a pris information ils observent nous comme reporters nous-mêmes dans le studio nous là pour nous permettre et même ça ou capable voir sur télévision la caillou c'est lui-même tout sous aller dans page Radio-Vision Céleste sur YouTube bien sur Facebook c'est ça que vous êtes capable voir avec des commentaires dans langue créole là que nous-mêmes avec tant de l'autre monde encore qui nous a lancé invitation pour être capable de faire ensemble avec nous. Mais pour l'instant, nous sommes capables de dire qu'il y a 95 millions de monde déjà qui votent aux États-Unis dans le cadre de l'élection. Ils ont voté bonheur, et soit qui votent par mail ou bien côté que tu as gagné un bureau que tu as ouvert avant l'élection, eh bien, monde ça y a voté. Il y a 40 qui votent bonheur, il y a state qui votent bonheur. C'est comme ça la situation dans le cadre de l'élection 2020, encore 2020, côté que fait que lui-même dans Georgia, alors que le président Donald Trump lui-même était dans la zone Pennsylvania, côté que était dans un state en pile supporter mais n'abdou dans Pennsylvania c'est un state pour l'instant si tu as dit élection finie là eh bien Joe Biden a gagné monsieur Donald Trump. On nous traverser avec nos confrères de NBC qui lui-même Brian Alexander qui c'est une correspondante qui lui-même pour montrer nous comment la situation est côté l'IA en aller là.
me not too long ago. So, you know what's interesting, though, Allison? He was something, of course, for his former Vice President Joe Biden. You know, Georgia's in a very weird position, and you could tell in that speech that he was speaking just as strongly for Georgia's two Senate candidates, Jon Ossoff and Reverend Raphael Warnock, the two Democrats that are running to unseat the two Republican senators right now. You know, Georgia is in a very weird position, a very strange position, in that we have not one but two Senate races this year, both of which could possibly go into a January runoff. So when we heard former President Obama speak today, we heard him say, essentially, going after the two current Georgia senators. He went after Georgia's governor. He repeatedly called the names of those two Senate candidates here. And then the biggest issue was really urging everybody here to get out and vote. You know, just a quick note about Georgia. You know, black voters are at the highest number that they've been in this country, about 30 million or so. That's higher than ever before. And the highest concentration when it comes to battleground states is right here in Georgia, about 32%. And so he was speaking to so many of those voters, saying, we need you to go out and vote. We need you to make sure that your voices are actually heard. Allison.
Blaine, let's talk about the demographics a little bit more, because the demographic shift that you're seeing there and the significance if Georgia turns blue in 2020.
The significance would be huge. The significance would be a very big significance because for the Democrats, but also what that means for Republicans. Keep in mind, we haven't just been seeing big name Democrats here. President Trump was here less than 24 hours ago, you know, trying to rally up the vote for his base, because if he loses Georgia, then there's a relatively narrow path to 270 after that. So that's why it's so very crucial in Republicans' minds that they stop this state from flipping blue, and why Democrats are trying so hard to make it happen. Now, as for those shifting demographics, counties right outside of Metro Atlanta, those are Cobb counties and Gwinnett County. Suburban areas outside of Metro Atlanta, they had been going red reliably since before when Jimmy Carter was on the ballot. Of course, you know, Georgia's own Jimmy Carter. Since then, they've gone red every single election except for 2016. That's when you saw both of those counties flip blue, and that's when you kind of saw this changing tide. In fact, I covered the 2016 election 4 years ago as a local reporter here in Georgia, and I spoke with the head of the state Democratic Party at the time, and he told me, look, yeah, Hillary Clinton didn't win that night, but he said he's encouraged. He called it a good night, and he pointed to Cobb and Gwinnett flipping blue. He said that's a sign of very big things to come for the Democratic Party. And 4 years later now, Allison, we're seeing that play out.
Two interesting counties to watch tomorrow. Blaine Alexander in Georgia, thank you so much.
You got it.
Joe Biden leading President Trump by 3 points in Florida. That's according to a New York Times Siena College poll. But that lead is within the 3-point margin of error. Canvassers for both campaigns are making one final push to get out the vote in Florida, hoping that knocking on a lot of doors today will make a big difference tomorrow. NBC News correspondent Ellison Barber has more from Miami.
Hey, Allison, until very recently, the Biden campaign was doing all of their voter outreach virtually because of COVID-19. But they have been, and they still are, getting help from outside groups like Somos PAC. That's who we are with today. They are out canvassing. These guys are about to knock on door number 71 or so, is that right?
Door number 71 of the day, yeah.
Tell me, you guys have data, I know, in some of your which voters you are going to, not only to make sure you're knocking on the right doors, but to make sure that they're people who haven't voted so far. 63%, 64% now of Miami-Dade County has already voted. How is it going in terms of making sure you're reaching voters who have not yet cast their ballot?
Well, what we're doing is every day our lists are updated. So every day we're doing our best to reach voters who have been untouched, people who may be undecided, people who might even feel like they don't want to vote, or feel like that their vote doesn't matter, or maybe they've decided that they're not going to vote at all. We're trying to reach these people and just have a conversation with them. Try to let them know that their voice matters and their vote matters, and that this is probably the most important election of our lifetimes, and that it's important for them to get out there, get out and vote.
You feel like you've been successful convincing people of that so far today?
Well, If our numbers are any indication, then absolutely. There's nothing more effective when it comes to campaigning than actually being door-to-door with people and talking with them face-to-face.
All right, this, I think, is your stop. I'll let you guys head that way while we stay out here. Allison, I'm going to let them go do what they are doing and let them head up to talk to another voter here. This group, Somos PAC, they tell us that they have knocked on 1 million doors across the state of Florida in the last few months, and they say about 500,000 of those have been in South Florida alone. The crazy thing is today, just today, and only in Miami-Dade County, they're trying to knock on 22,000 doors. They say all of them are people who they know have not yet passed their ballot. The Trump campaign in their final stretch, they're doing the same thing. They have been out canvassing for months now, despite the pandemic, and knocking on doors all across the state of Florida. The Trump campaign tells us they have knocked on around 3.8 million doors in the state of Florida. They say they have teams out doing it today as well. These guys, though, trying to help the Biden campaign turn out some last-minute voters. Allison?
Ohio has a near-perfect record picking the president, voting for the eventual winner in every election but one since the 1940s. Joe Biden making his final push in the Buckeye State today. But will demographic changes in Ohio, an older, whiter, more working-class population, tip the state for President Trump? NBC News national political reporter Josh Lederman joins me from Lorain, Ohio. Josh, President Trump beat Hillary Clinton by 8 points in Ohio back in 2016. Joe Biden added a last-minute campaign stop there today. What's his message to voters there?
Well, you summed it up well in your intro there, Allison. This is territory that a lot of Democrats had written off because of the changing demographics here, and because Donald Trump won so convincingly here 4 years ago. A lot of Democrats thought it wasn't really worth all of the investment to try to focus on a state like Ohio when there were better opportunities for pickups elsewhere. But now we're seeing this very tight race here. The president's numbers here hurting as a result of the continued loss of support, particularly in the suburbs, especially those ring counties that Columbus and Cincinnati and Cleveland, just about 30 miles from here. And so the Biden campaign, along with outside groups that are try to potentially win back a state with its 18 electoral votes that could really make it impossible for Donald Trump to keep up mathematically if they're right and if Ohio voters are ready to come back.
Josh, one reason that Trump won 2016 was his promise to bring back manufacturing jobs. Do folks there think that the president delivered on that?
Yes and no. You know, it's funny. I just spoke with the mayor of Lorain a few minutes ago, who was talking about when Donald Trump came to Toledo and promised that the Republic Steel manufacturing plant here was going to reopen. It's been idle for a long time. That hasn't happened. And the mayor says that he talked to the steel company and they say until the tariffs get sorted out and there's not all of the policy, they're not going to be able to go out on a limb and reopen that facility. We also had talked to Javier Candelaria, who's an out-of-work steel worker. He's actually the representative for the steelworkers union in this area. Take a listen to what he had to say about the way the economy's been changing here.
There are some people that believe the economy is doing great. Like I said, several years back, we had altogether, close to 700 people working at Lorain Tubulars. We're down to a little over 200. So I don't see the economy doing so well for those people that have left, lost their jobs and have not been able to come back. To me, I don't see the economy is doing as well unless you're involved in the stock market. Maybe, you might be doing well with that, but, your everyday worker, we're still struggling.
So these are a lot of union workers who traditionally might be inclined to vote for the Democrats. They turned away from Democrats 4 years ago. Joe Biden's task is to bring back those voters, including in places that are really competitive, like Lorain County, where Hillary Clinton won by just 131 votes. Drive up turnout in the inner cities, particularly in Columbus and Cincinnati, while Donald Trump's task is to try to drive up his turnout in the rural areas and along the Indiana border if he's going to fend off an upset here by Joe Biden.
Josh, even though Hillary Clinton lost Ohio, she actually won Lorain County in 2016. What sense are you getting? How are voters there leaning now in 2020?
Well, it is certainly leaning up be a close race here like it was 4 years ago. We've talked to voters who were casting votes early, who voted for Biden, who voted couple, who split their vote. And the one unifying theme from all of them seems to be that they're scared. Take a listen.
I think to our country that we cannot take for granted.
I feel like Trump's going to take my women's rights away. I'm scared for our future.
I realize that a lot of things are coming around because the economy isn't as where it should be because of COVID. And I think that we should necessarily go ahead and try to get jobs back, but do it in a safe way that doesn't endanger people's health. Because the economy isn't as where it should be because of COVID. And I think that we should necessarily go ahead and try to get jobs back, but do it in a safe way that doesn't endanger people's health.
Allison, COVID-19 clearly high on the minds of voters as they are going to the polls here in Ohio, a state that's been hit hard along with the rest of the upper Midwest states. Ohio setting a new record just on Thursday with more than 3,500 new COVID cases in a day.
Josh, a lot of people, as you said, thinking about the pandemic as they head to the polls. Thanks so much. Election was fought in the courts. The Trump and Biden campaigns lawyering up before Election Day. History tells us these legal battles can have lasting consequences. NBC News Now correspondent Simone Boyce looks at how the 2000 election was fought in the courts.
Good grief. Look at that. 11. That means automatic recount.
The suspense is mounting in Florida tonight.
Probably at least 500 people outside, spirited demonstrators both for Bush and Gore.
The presidential race of 2000 turned the American experiment on its head. And as the clock ticks towards another consequential election, we thought we should look back at this pivotal moment in history and see what the past can tell us about the present.
At what point did you realize, oh, this isn't going to be your average presidential election?
Tim Russert and I knew almost immediately because it kept whipsawing back and forth.
On election night, NBC was the first network to call the key state of Florida for Vice President Al Gore until
NBC News is now taking Florida out of Vice President Gore's column and putting it back in the too close to call column.
And then I was getting phone calls from those two campaigns, and they were saying, oh, don't go too far too fast here.
Hillary Rodham Clinton was a big winner tonight. I was covering Hillary Clinton's Senate campaign, and the President of the United States leans down from the stage and says to me, Andrea, how is Al doing in Florida?
Then in the early hours of Wednesday, November 8th, the networks made a very different call.
Bush is the president-elect of the United States. He has won the state of Florida.
Gore called George W. Bush to concede, but took it back after Florida showed less than a 2,000 margin. The nation was left in limbo.
We don't just have egg in our face.
Voilà, amis auditeurs, web spectateurs, depuis...
I think the country is very mature, quite honestly. I think that they were willing to be patient. They wanted to get it right.
The close results in Florida triggered an automatic recount, narrowing Bush's lead to just 327 votes. Both campaigns lawyered up, with Gore pushing for a hand recount.
And we've heard a lot about Chad, so let's just do a quick lesson in Chad.
If you went to vote in Florida, you had a punched card that you would...
Dernière information pour nous capables de suivre avec des commentaires en créole. Nous mettons fin avec ça. Nous est possible, bien que nous capables expérimenter des petits problèmes puis devant, mais nous est possible. Parce que l'écran nous normal là, nous en signe de contrariété, même gens avec gros chaîne de télévision, et d'ailleurs, image n'a poté pour yo, nos potés yo sorti dans de grandes chaînes de télévision, bien n'a travail pour nous capables bien permettre que nous représenter en tant qu'Haïtiens. Alors, élection 2020, élection 20 sur 20, élection quarantaine, élection 2020, c'est ça n'a porté pour vous. Sur la radio-télévision Céleste, dans l'essai que nous avons fait, nous disons merci, ou même qui avons regardé ensemble avec nous sur YouTube, sur Facebook. Nous disons au revoir.
Finish the recounts. But there were distractions.
You had a Republican protest.
programmation nous. Et n'a rappelé que après-midi ou pas gagner un podium évangélique compte tenu de nous avons pile bagaille pour nous arranger pour nous-mêmes pour nous permettre que bagaille vous faites bien, eh bien prend espoir que n'a tourné et là nous capable là. Bon Dieu béni, bye bye tout le monde. C'était Zamou Jean Renel. I love you all. May God bless you.
Jean moins bien branché là, ça son vision céleste. Radio Vision Céleste. Bonne nouvelle évangile, ça son vision céleste. Radio Vision Céleste. Parole pour sauver l'âme, ça son vision céleste. Radio Vision Céleste. Conseil pour la fin.